Good evening. My name is Jeannie Rubin, and on behalf of the Board of Directors of GALA North Texas, I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you very much for coming out on a school night. GALA is a nonprofit, nonpartisan educational organization committed to celebrating diversity and enhancing equality for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender North Texans in our schools, workplaces, and communities. We support both a business network and, more importantly for tonight, a youth group for LGBT and Q, in this case, which means questioning youth. That's a weekly program, and we have some GALA youth volunteers in the back there that have some more information on that program that we hope you will take with you and share. It's geared towards middle and high school age youth, so perfect for almost everybody in the room. GALA really wants to be a resource to you, so please reach out to us anytime. We hope for those of you that we are just meeting that this is the beginning of a conversation. Our goals include offering educational events in the community, so please take a few minutes at the end, and we actually are going to give you about 5 minutes at the very end in the program to fill out the evaluations, and especially the part that says how we can help you in the future or what other programs you'd be interested in that have to do with LGBT issues. A little bit of housekeeping first. If you didn't notice, there's some amazing food over there. Please help yourself. And if you didn't find the restrooms, they're all the way down the hallway and turn right. So a couple quick thank yous before we get started. I'd like to thank our co-sponsors for this event, the Transgender Education Network of Texas, otherwise known as TENT, Transcendence International, GALA Youth, which is our youth group, and Equality Texas. We'd also like to give a big shout out and thanks to Job Corps faculty and students who are the ones who prepared the lovely food this evening. And Job Corps also has some information if you know any students who could benefit from that program, and they're right here in McKinney. A quick thank you to Scott Smith of the CI Web Group, who's videotaping us tonight. So hopefully you can share this with colleagues who weren't able to make it. And also to Attorney Shelley Skeen, who helped me put this evening together, to an amazing and very hardworking board of directors who, raise your hand, most of them you met at the door or they're still out there working, and the panel of experts who you are about to meet. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator for this evening. Leslie McMurray is a columnist, a public speaker, and a subject matter expert on transgender issues for the Dallas media outlets. But my favorite part of her bio says that she's a rebel rouser. So take it away, Leslie.
Yeah, I was that smart alecky kid in school that teachers always said, well, you just shut up and try and learn something. You're never going to make a living doing that. So I spent 35 years on the radio. That'll teach them. My name is Leslie McMurray. I am a transgender woman, hence the voice, which I despise with all of my being, because I spent most of my life making a great living with it, and now I hate it. But that's just part of the burden we carry. I want to introduce our panel of experts here. I know most all of them personally and adore them. Dr. Shamina Lopez, Assistant Professor of Pediatrics, the Pediatric Endocrinology Division at UT Southwestern Medical Center and Children's Health Dallas. Ryan Smith, a father of 3, including 1 child who identifies as transgender. Paul Castillo, staff attorney at Lambda Legal. Steve Rudner, the chairman of the board of Equality Texas, the state's largest LGBT lobbying organization and managing partner of the Rudner Law Offices. Also, Dr. Oliver Bloomer. Dr. Bloomer is the co-director of the Transgender Education Network of Texas, or TENT, and Finn Jones. He's the vice president and co-founder of Transcendence International, and I'll tell you more about them in just a little bit. But the overall agenda for tonight is to talk about back to school from a transgender kid's perspective. Now that you know a little bit about us, how many are classroom teachers here? Just so we kind of know who all we're talking to. Counselors? A lot of counselors. Good. Love to see you. Principals? Superintendents? School board members? All right then. Well, it's good to know you, and thank you very, very much for caring enough to join us tonight. When I came out as transgender in 2012, there was very little in the way of resources, no movies or TV shows with transgender characters, and trans people were largely living invisible lives. And today we seem to be topic A for some reason, and the news of assaults on our people and on our civil rights come hot and heavy. A week ago today, Texas and 4 other Republican-led states filed the latest lawsuits seeking to roll back the Obama administration's efforts to strengthen transgender rights, saying new federal non-discrimination health rules could force doctors to act contrary to their medical judgment or religious beliefs. The lawsuit is the second in recent months in which conservative states have sued over federal efforts to defend transgender rights. The other was an attempt to deny transgender students the ability to use the proper restroom in school. Yesterday, the state of Virginia appealed this to the U.S. Supreme Court. Transgender students are some of the most vulnerable across the board. According to the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network's 2013 National School Climate Survey, more than 75% of transgender students report feeling unsafe in school, and more than 63% of transgender students say they avoid using public restrooms because of fears of harassment or assault. Think about that. Because of this increased anxiety, transgender youths are more than twice as likely as their peers to experience depression and contemplate suicide. This is also according to a 2015 study in the Journal of Adolescent Health. Findings from that survey demonstrate that Texas schools were not safe for most transgender secondary school students. In addition, many LGBT students in Texas were not protected by comprehensive anti-bullying or harassment school policies. Findings demonstrate that students attending schools with these resources and supports report more positive school experiences, including lower victimization and absenteeism, and higher academic achievement. Tonight we seek to dispel some myths and provide you with some tools that you can use that are practical and evidence-based that will hopefully lead to a better educational experience for all concerned. The first person I would like to introduce tonight is Ryan Smith. He was raised with small-town values in an evangelical country church and educated at a conservative Baptist university. Ryan wasn't meant to be an ally for the LGBT community, but now, helping to raise his transgender daughter, he is determined to help educate others by sharing his story of transition, one that began long before his daughter was born. An accomplished speaker and amateur podcaster, Ryan is a husband of 14 years and a father of 3. Please welcome Ryan Smith.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for all of you being here today. It's something that makes me, really gives me hope that, all of you would take time out to hear a little bit about what our experience is as a family, not just in dealing with the schools, but also just dealing with society and some of the things that people may think or misconceptions that they hold. But I'd like to tell you a story about a little girl named Catherine. Now, Catherine was born, and when you think about a child being born, you think about limitless potential. We are all guilty of telling our children they can be anything they want to be, and that the sky is the limit to whatever their dreams may hold. And so you might think that as a parent, I was one of those people who believed so dearly into that. And when my child was born and became fascinated by keys and clocks and learned the full alphabet at a year old, and not just being able to recite the alphabet, but being able to pick out the alphabet in different orders. And you call out a letter, and the child could walk up to the letter and point to it at a year. And you can think about me as a parent going, oh yeah, we got one, and then at 18 months, to have the child pick up a mouse and begin to navigate that mouse around a computer, clicking little animated balloons and popping them, and being able to take a CD out and change those CDs and start new applications at 18 months, you really begin to think about what could this child achieve. Because at that point, at 18 months, and what that child could do, I begin to understand that we severely underestimate what these children can accomplish. Because if a child can accomplish learning to use a computer at 18 months, there's no telling what a child could do at 3 years or 6 years. You know, we marvel at you know, people who can play, children who can play the piano and do all of these things, but in actuality, most children are capable of these things. Perhaps we just underestimate what they're capable of. You know, at 3 years old was reading simple words, and 6 years old was reading chapter books, and it just continued. We tried athletic activities, and to see this child run, I mean, Forrest Gump might have said that he could run like the wind blows, but my child was faster. I swear to you, my child was faster. You know, but at that time, and seeing all of this potential, there's one thing, you know, that started at about the age of 3, is Catherine began to say, you know, I wish I was a girl. And, you know, for me, it was like, okay, all right, but you still want to be, you know, you don't really believe that, right? Come on, we'll just go out and throw the football around. Because that was the way that I was raised. I was raised with a certain set of expectations of what a child's life was supposed to be and what that development process was supposed to be. And so I began to place my child in this box that I developed out of. And so as this went on, and that child became 6 and wanted to be a lifeguard and wanted to wear bracelets on her wrists, you know, I'm like, yeah, you really want to wear bracelets? Really? You know, let's go play some big video games or something like that, you know? And I began to continue to force this child down a path that I was taught was the way it was supposed to be. You know, having grown up in a small town and gone to, evangelical church and the things that I was taught as what was right and what was wrong definitely told and informed me on how my child should be raised. But at the age of 9, my child became more vocal about her desire to be a girl. And so, you know, like any parent, we went and we took our child to see a counselor. And after the evaluation, it was true that not only did our child strongly and deeply hold this desire, but she was indeed transgender. And that was a tough thing for me as a parent. Because for 9 years, I had this concept of who this child was and who this child was going to be. And not only did I have to come to grips with the fact that this child was some child that I needed to begin to get to know better, because this child was different. And it became a challenge for me, because when that child was developing in the womb, I made promises to that child that I was going to stand up for that child. I was going to defend that child. I was going to make that child successful in our society. She was going to do great things. And now I sat looking at this child who was transgender, who had communicated this desire that she was a girl. Not just that she wanted to be a girl, she was a girl. And I had to come to grips with the fact that I made promises to that child, and I had to make a decision that despite what I might have been feeling inside, I had a role and a responsibility and promises that I had made to that child to stand up for that child. And it was then that I decided to keep my promise. And so I've had to stand up for my child. And that has been standing up for my child and advocating for my child at school. Because at 9 years old, we're already in the elementary school. We're already going. And when she transitioned at the end of her it was the end of third grade, going into fourth grade. So she'd gone to third grade, three grades, kindergarten through third, so that's 4 grades, right? I can do math. And she was going to come back a completely different person. And she was the only child that we know of at the school that the school had ever dealt with. The school had never prepared for this type of eventuality. And so throughout the summer, we basically twiddled our thumbs and hoped and waited for this fateful meeting where we would decide how we would proceed in the school district with our new child. And so the first thing was discussing the name, because we had come up with a name, and actually 2 days ago marked the 1-year anniversary of us officially changing her name. So it's a huge milestone. And so the school had promised that she would be called, what she wanted to be called, that they would make every effort to change her name in everything that they could, but there may be some things that would not get the name changed until it legally changed. And so that's what was the catalyst for going and get the name legally changed, because when the school started, there were her birth name was written and scratched out and handwritten on things, and it was clearly a difference. And one of the things that we know is that children notice those little differences. That yes, her name made it on the paper, but it wasn't printed, it was written. And that sticks with someone. It would stick with you. It would stick with you. If your name was misspelled or something like that, and it was scrabbled out and written, you would notice the difference. And our child noticed the difference. But most importantly, it was the bathroom. And the school changed the policy on bathrooms, and we were thankful for that. That that no longer were there, boys and girls lines. That no longer were there, everybody goes to the bathroom en masse. Children could go by themselves. But the reality was that there was, of all the bathrooms in that school, there was only one bathroom that my child had access to. And despite the fact that if she was in art or in music or in PE, in order for her to go to the bathroom, she would have to pass 2 or 3 perfectly empty bathrooms to get to the one bathroom she could use. Now, to cover this, the school set a policy that all children could go to that same bathroom that she could use. But over time, it became irrational, unrealistic for children who could go to any bathroom in the school to pass up normal bathrooms to go to this one special bathroom. And it's these differences that begin to stand out. But probably the biggest thing that happened for us is when we begin to realize that in an effort to be parent-focused, in an effort to be proactive, the school made a phone call to parents for a field trip. There were parents in a group that was selected with our child, and basically they told those parents that there would be a transgender child in their group and wanted to know if those parents were okay with this. Now, I remind you, there was one transgender out child in our school. So it didn't take a lot of detective work to determine who that child was. And so the school told us that there were parents that were calling and they were concerned. It was really disappointing, because in an effort to be proactive with parents, they had outed our child. And that's huge. These are some of the things that happen that we've had to deal with the school, and I want to be mindful of time because there's a lot of other great people here on this panel. But these are the things that we have to deal with. It's what we found overall is that it's not so much the school, and the school is complicit in some of this, but it's how the school works with the community and with the parents. Because when parents begin to call and say things about the trans kid who was at the school, these parents were saying some pretty mean, cruel things. And what we were finding was that the school didn't necessarily use that opportunity to continue the education that they were giving to the children who went there. And so one of the things that I'd like to leave you with tonight is that all of you are educators. And you are educating our future. And they have limitless potential. But education doesn't stop when that bell rings, that last bell rings. That when parents come to the school and when parents say things about children that don't uphold the standards that you hold their children to, education can't stop there. That those parents need to be educated and stopped. If those parents are behaving and showing bullying type behavior, it is the parents that also need you guys to educate. And so I challenge all of you. You don't have to go and march. I'd love for you to. But you don't have to do that. What you have to do, what I'm asking you to do, is to uphold the standards and the values that you're teaching those children, uphold and hold those parents to those same standards. Thank you so much for coming and taking a time out to hear my story tonight. It really means a lot to me, and I hope that you guys go out and just stand up for the principles and the values that you're teaching those children, because it's those values that's going to effect the change that we need so that everyone can enjoy the freedoms and liberties that are promised to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan, so much. We need more parents like you, and thank you for the courage of your family. I want to move on next to Dr. Oliver Bloomer and Finn Jones. Dr. Bloomer is a distinguished educator, speaker, and independent researcher in the emerging specialties of sexual and gender minorities, with an emphasis on cultural and clinical competency, care, and services to children, youth, adults, and seniors, and the transgender and gender-expansive communities. Presently, Dr. Bloomer serves on Out and Equal's National Transgender Advisory Committee and is co-author of O&E Workplace Gender Identity and Transition Guidelines, co-director to Transgender Education Network of Texas, or TENT, they have a table in the back, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to furthering the cause of gender-diverse people in Texas through education in both public and private forums. He serves as subject matter expert for Region 6 Community Relations Services under the Department of Justice and the Dallas City Council LGBT Task Force. Dr. Bloomer is a member of the World Professional Association of Transgender Health, or WPATH, which establishes the standards of care. Finn Jones is the Vice President and co-founder of Transcendence International. He serves as a leader in the transgender community of DFW and serves as a consultant to other transgender communities outside of Texas. Finn participates in social education, civil and equal rights advocacy, and works closely with many organizations such as the ACLU, ACH, Excel, LGBTQ Saves, University of Texas at Arlington, Northlake College, and surrounding GSAs to help further education on transgender and gender diversity issues and policies. Finn is a veteran of the United States Coast Guard. He lives in Arlington with his wife Susan and their wonderful four-legged critters. I want to bring that up to these gentlemen here to talk about some of the terminology, because before we can really have a discussion about what we need to see done, we need to understand the terms that we'll be using. So, gentlemen, I'll turn it over to you.
Get your mic. Take your mic.
Hello.
So,
Hello.
I thought maybe we'd have a little game with this, maybe.
That's Finn in the blue, by
I
the
have
way.
the
Finn in the
answers.
blue.
We have the answers.
You have the answers? We'll cover them up.
Okay.
So there are some terms that get volleyballed around, and sometimes we think we know what they are. Sometimes we need a flow chart by the time we've seen 6 of them. Generally, when we start teaching something like Trans 101, your eyeballs roll to the back of your head and you go, this is like Greek. It's like a whole new language. One of the caveats I have is that you'll hear some terms that have become more timely and present in media and in politics. and other places. And just know that language changes swiftly. So for instance, I'm just going to throw this out there. If you hear the word tranny, there are those of us in the transgender community who feel that is very derogatory. And in fact, if it's used at the time when there is a hate crime, there's a violent crime going on against another person, and tranny is used in the process, that is considered a hate crime and immediately goes to the FBI. So words are important. Then there are other groups, which I will call probably not to really pigeonhole, but more the millennial types who feel strongly that if you grab a hold of a word that has been derogatory to your tribe, then make it and own it. So when people use it, you go, yeah, you're right. I am a queer, or I am genderqueer, or I am transgender. So when you hear words and you think, oh, I don't know which ones to use, just ask, if you're working with children, you're working with youth, just ask them what it means to them. And once you find out what it means to them, then you know how to use it in that particular proximity. So let's start with something like, what is a transgender person? Who is a transgender person? And we do never, ever use the word transgendered. Yes. ED on the end, no.
It's transgender person or transgender people.
Or folks, or chickens, or, you know.
It's an adjective, not a noun.
It's an adjective.
A transgender person who, well, I can cheat. The word transgender is an umbrella term that we use really for gender diverse, all the other genderqueer, all the ones that you can put out. But a transgender person is someone who was biologically born as one sex. The doctor came out of the mom. Doctor said, boy or girl, and that is specifically from looking at the genitals. That's it. So they can't look into their mind and see that they might actually be a different gender in their own mind. So I can use myself as, for example, I'm a transgender man. I knew at 4 that I was different. I knew that I was not supposed to be a girl. I knew that I was a boy. And I knew that because my brain told me that I was supposed to be a boy. Does that make sense to everybody? When I looked in the mirror, I would see a boy. I would never see a girl, ever. And as I grew older and hit puberty, then it was even worse. Suicide thoughts came in, all that stuff. So it's in your brain. Gender is in your brain. It is not biological. It is in your brain. So there you go.
There you go.
That's the best example.
So
there's lots of definitions.
A transgender youth or child that comes in basically knows innately and tells their parents, if they have cool parents. If they don't have cool parents, they'll know they better not share that with them. So that's the other part of counseling piece. Those children who need to talk to somebody but can't talk to their children, or can't talk to their parents because they know there's going to be some kind of repercussion or consequence. So the counselor may be the very first person that they can actually share these particular thoughts and feelings with. So the transgender individual is someone who does not align themselves, their identity, with the what was assigned to them at birth when they looked between the legs and said boy or girl, and put a gender marker on your birth certificate that said male or female. So what about this thing called gender expression?
So gender expression is how you express your gender, right? So the social norm, women would wear dresses to express their femininity. Males typically wear slacks, a tie, suits to express their male expression. So it is what you look, your appearance on the outside, right? Your clothes, your hair, your jewelry, perfume, cologne, any expression, external expression of your gender, right? So my wife is cisgendered, which that's going to be a term that we come up with, we will come to. But so my wife is cisgendered, but she wears jeans and t-shirt quite often, right? But that's typically what a man would wear, right? So, but she's not expressing herself as a man wearing jeans and a t-shirt. That's just what she enjoys wearing. But she also wears dresses and skirts, correct? So I'm dressed as a typical male right now, correct? But when I identified as lesbian, I wore the exact same clothes. Right?
Yeah, I was just going to speak to that.
Exactly the same.
Right. I was in Seattle.
They just look better now. They fit better now.
That reminds me when I was in Seattle, and I
Yeah.
thought, there's so many women in Seattle that look like they're lesbians. And then my mother said, no, they just look sporty.
Sporty.
You know, who's going to get your hair done when it's going to go away the next day?
They're a tomboy.
But
That
that's
was
an,
the term that
that's
I
an
was using.
expression. There are contracts that are made when we work for certain organizations. Like if you worked for IBM in the 60s and 70s, guys had to wear black suits, white shirts, tiny little ties. Everything had to match. Or you might work for a company that says you can wear whatever you want, except Fridays is really the day you can wear whatever you want. But expression or nothing, again. But the expression is how an individual comes across to the people around them. I work with police agencies and so forth, and I say to them, I said, okay, you guys who've been on a force for quite some time, and you have these women who want to be policemen, and you say, oh, they all have short hair, and they dress in the same uniforms we do, so they may all be lesbians. No, you can't judge that person, especially their sexual orientation, not their gender, but their sexual orientation, which would be lesbian in this case. They judge people by what they wear. But we continue to do that, and we do it without even thinking about it because it's hardwired.
Nope, I agree. I
Okay.
concur.
You concur?
I concur.
Okay, so
okay,
we
here's
get
one
to-
for you.
Okay.
Cisgender.
Cisgender. We really want to confuse everybody. Right now. How many chemistry teachers are in here? Any? None. Okay. Well, trans is like, if you like to ski, how about skiing slopes? You trans across, back, and forth. Now, that isn't really what we do, but when you look at a molecule, like a sugar molecule or a fructose molecule, it has a certain makeup to it, the way the molecules twist at a certain position. They either go right or they go left. So, someone looking at a mirror image of themselves sees the trans image of themselves. When you just are without a mirror, you're looking at you, the cis image or the same image. So what we look at, what it's looking is using these kinds of cis, meaning you agree with the assessment the doctor made when they slapped you on the back of the hiney, looked between your legs and said, girl. You agree with that. So cisgender people agree with the assignment of their gender and sex at birth. Cisgender people. So I would say, I'm not going to ask anybody to like out themselves, but how many cisgender people are out there? Oh, wow, we have more trans
Meaning you
people.
feel comfortable with the gender
we
that
have a
you
lot of
have.
there must be a lot of other kind of people out there.
Right.
Okay. So cis, that doesn't mean you're heterosexual, okay? That's different. Cis means that you agree with the assignment of birth of being either male or female. Like you never had to look in the mirror and say, am I a girl or a boy? You just knew it. No one had to tell you. So for those of you who were not
Does everybody
listening,
understand
who
the
are in
question?
their phones or wherever you're at, okay, how many cisgender people are in the room?
There we go.
All right.
All right. If you're questioning, come and talk to us later. So here's a question. Here's a question for all of you. Is there a difference between sexual orientation and gender orientation? I want to hear yes or no.
Yes,
Thank
have
you.
it.
Wow.
Yes, have it.
That's awesome. I'm impressed.
So sexual orientation is who you are attracted to.
Right.
And gender identity is who you are. And it is an innate intelligence that is here. Some say it's my soul. And you can't question my soul. I'm not about chromosomes. I'm not about what somebody said in some big book that says this is made this way and no other way. No, my soul and my innate intelligence tells me at the age of 3 that I was supposed to be a boy. It took me to be the age of 55 before I could do anything about it. So.
Yeah. Right. What else? Let's see. Well, we did cis. So how about intersex?
Wow, I think we're going to leave that one for Dr. Lopez.
Okay, that's a good one for that's a good one for Dr.
It'll
Lopez.
come up.
Yep. Wow. Gender fluid.
Oh, wow, I think that's too
That's
heavy.
and that's right now. I will tell you because I work with a lot of youth. I see a lot of gender fluid now with teens and young people. A lot of gender fluid. I very rarely hear transgender.
It's not a new thing that says gender fluid on a can with a lot of caffeine in it either.
Right.
It's youth that really, they're not being anarchists. Let's just
Right.
be real clear about that. They can exist in their community, because some can't. They exist in their community and among their peers as not existing as either male or female. They fit somewhere in the spectrum in between. Now, parents get all upset. They go, this must be a phase. Well, you know, if I go back to the way things were in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, there were a lot of things we did that were phases. This is where youth are now. They don't want to say, look, I don't want to have to do what boys do or girls do. I'm just who I am. Just see me who I am, and don't make up something that you think I'm about, because this is who I'm about right now.
Definitely. Agreed.
That doesn't mean they sleep with lots of people. That's not the fluidity we're talking about.
different.
Although it could be. Yeah,
That could be another term.
that's another
but-
term.
There's
So-
lots of terms out
So
there.
have we termed them out? I think those
Yeah,
important
these-
things.
I
are-
will tell you, I mean, this is a list that I put together. It's front and back, and this is just the surface. This is, you can go on Google, and oh my gosh, you'll find sheets and pages. And I will tell you, the youth now are coming up with more and more terms. I mean, I keep a chart. I keep a little list in my phone. Like, they'll come to me with a new definition, and I'm like, oh, that's a cool term. Yeah.
So I said language is always changing. So
Yep.
don't be afeared if you don't use the right term and they ask you, why did you use that term? Well, you know, okay, tell me what the new ones are and I'll write them down and
Yep.
we'll deal with them. So let's talk about some things that we've both done with school systems as recently as today, and you know, what you've been dealing with in the Fort Worth area, and I'll share some as well.
Well, in the Fort Worth area, real quick, a little bit about, so my organization, Transcendence International, Inc., we started 4 years ago as a support organization for transgender individuals and their families. My wife had no support when I started my transition, and we talked to other couples and families, and we found that in Tarrant County there was a big void of help and support. So we founded this organization, and since then, we get 50 to 60 people at our Fort Worth group meeting every 2 weeks. About half of those are teenagers and young adults. And so we work with a lot of teenagers. And my wife is a youth minister, so she works with more teens than I do. And I will tell you that I wanted to share my perspective. I've been doing this for 4 years, and some of the kids that we've had them from the very beginning. We've watched them grow up in their schools, in their homes, in their families, and some of them, when they first came to us, they wouldn't, I mean, y'all see this, they wouldn't say anything, they would sit in a corner, they wouldn't talk to anybody, a lot of them would wear a hoodie and they'd just sit there. And I can tell you that those kids now, since we have worked with them and worked with their families and tried to build a support network and a support system for them within their family and their schools, those kids are now going to change the world. I mean, they come to me on a daily basis. When I see them, they're always like, Finn, you're not going to believe what happened at school today. They've come out to their friends and their family and their teachers and their colleagues, and it's incredible to watch the changes in these kids. Once you enable them and give them that self-esteem and that self-worth to change and to really identify with who they truly are, and you listen to them and believe them, the changes are incredible. They're making straight A's. Now we're working to trying to get them into college. They have a friend network now where they had no friends before. So the socialization is just as important. That's why we're building a community. In fact, one story real quick. This happened just a couple of weeks ago. In fact, one of my 13-year-old trans boys who just came out this year at school, he goes to a private school in Tarrant County, and he did, I'm going to start crying. but he did a gender diversity training for the staff at his school, and he is 13 years old. That's what we're doing. That's what we're empowering these young people to do, is they teach us every day. Every time we talk to them, they teach us more than we ever teach them. It's incredible. So when they talk to you, believe them and listen to them, because they know what they're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Do I have like 1 minute? 1 minute? Yeah. 1 minute. And that doesn't happen everywhere. I
No.
want to share with you just this past week, a third grader. She began her transition towards the end of the year last year. She went this year fully as female, and her parents are on board and trying to work with the principals and the counselor. One of her friends came up to her and said, "My mom told me that I do not have to call you by your new name. I can call you your old name because you're not really a girl. My mom had told that, so I'm not going to call you by the name you think you want to have now." This is a third grader. Now, where is this coming from?
The parent.
Okay, so we already know this is harassment, but that child doesn't know it, and the parent doesn't know it. It's bullying, and in many ways, if it catches on with other kids, that age group, they'll begin to do the same thing, or this wonderful third grader turns to her and says, "Your mother is misinformed." One of these youth that are just going to kick butt. You know, there are those that have been already cyberbullied. They've already been retaliated against. Remember, that's the fourth part of bullying that you hardly hear about. Bullying, harassment, cyber, and retaliation. But cyber also means any kind of electrical, anything. So the retaliation part is something that counselors, teachers, parents, staff don't understand that they're doing it. So I'll give you this one more situation. A 14-year-old who began transition last year now comes back in her she is gender fluid. She identifies as male, but she dresses more gender fluid. So the principal and the counselors don't understand that this is a representation of who that person is. It's a representation. It doesn't mean that the person is flip-flopping if they decide one day to dress maybe on the more feminine side and on the other side more butch, if you will. So she goes into the bathroom just to wash her hands. It happens to be the bathroom is not the only bathroom she has assigned to, meaning she has one bathroom in an entire high school, which is 100 yards away from any of her classes. That's a football field, folks. So after an art project, she went in to just wash her hands. Two boys came in with cameras, with their phones, and started taking pictures of her and began tweeting all over Facebook, all over there with their friends, calling her tranny, calling her all kinds of things, just livid. Guess who was sent home for using the wrong bathroom? Not the other fellows were not sent home. She was. Now she goes by he. But now she texts me in a crisis because now they are still telling her to go to the one bathroom, and every class she goes in, it's not just people mumbling under their breath. It is people using words I'm going to tell you so you understand. GD, do I have to have class with this F-ing tranny? To her face. If the teacher is in the room and the teacher hears that, they have to start reporting it. This is how we have to get to educate people. So in your schools, if you haven't gone over the subtleties and the nuances of how kids do this harassment and how they bully people, every word hurts. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bloomer and Finn. I have a funny story. My daughter, who I'm very, very proud of, she lives in Georgia, a pretty conservative part of Georgia, and she has 3 kids, my grandkids, and the youngest is 5. And so she's starting kindergarten. And they sent home a little survey asking things like, what does she like? Does she have a stuffed animal that she likes to lay down for a nap? Or is there any disciplinary issues? And one of the questions down there is like number 6 on the chart was things that upset her. And so she wrote 2 things down. One of them was mashed potatoes, because mashed potatoes, I don't know why, but she just doesn't, it's not that she doesn't like to eat them, they upset her. So whatever, sippy cups, mashed potatoes. But the other thing she wrote that upsets her is transgender hate speech, because Grandma Leslie is transgender, and she will not brook anything from that. So I'm really, really proud of my daughter and my grandkids, because that's how they know me. Our next speaker, I'm a huge fan of hers. Shamina Lopez is the Assistant Professor of Pediatrics, Pediatric Endocrinology Division at UT Southwestern Medical Center and Children's Health Dallas, Medical Director and founder of the Gender Education and Care Interdisciplinary Support, or GENESIS program, at Children's Medical Center in Dallas, which opened in 2015. This multidisciplinary program provides comprehensive mental and endocrine care for youth with gender dysphoria. I first met Dr. Lopez when I was on a panel speaking on transgender healthcare at UT Southwestern. She was the moderator that day, and so now the roles are kind of reversed. I consider her a friend and a hero to the transgender community, and I'm so proud to have the Genesis Clinic here in Dallas. Dr. Lopez will be discussing the medical and psychological issues facing transgender youth and dispelling the disturbing myth that cross-sex hormones are being given to pre-adolescent children. Dr. Lopez?
Thank you so much, Leslie, for the introduction. By the way, the real heroes are the parents of my patients and all the allies of the transgender community. But I'm really humbled to be here, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me. And I'm so excited that so many counselors and educators are here, because as much as we try from our hospital to help our patients, school is a vital part of the day. And if we and their parents support them, but they don't get the support they need at school, it's not going to work. So I'm really excited you're here. I'm going to share my perspective as a physician and speaking for what I see in my experience with our patients. Okay, I'm going to start with this drawing. So this is a 7-year-old trans girl, so assigned male at birth. And she came to our clinic when she was 7, and all our patients have a psychological assessment in which they're asked to draw a picture of themselves, and she asked if she could draw it in 3 parts, and we said yes, okay. So she drew it in these 3 parts, and the first one, she looks like a boy in a maze with a question mark on the head, and outside you can see it says "My Freedom." The second part, he's coming out of the maze, seeing the exit in pink, and this is the last picture. And this is before she transitioned. She was living as a boy still, but this is how she wanted to look. And she said this: when I was little, I thought I was a girl. Then everybody told me I was a boy. Then I got very sad because I felt I was going to die unhappy and sad. So if a parent tells you that, that changes everything. You want to help them, and you sometimes have to change the world. So I just want to talk to you a little bit of research data and what we know about how common it is to be transgender and why that is. We don't know a whole lot, actually, but we know that 0.3% of adults in the U.S. identify themselves as transgender, but there's other higher prevalences reported, for example, of 1.2% in the adolescent population in New Zealand. So it's somewhere between that range. It has existed throughout history. We know in many cultures everywhere in the world, it's no longer considered a result of rearing or childhood events such as abuse or trauma, and it's not considered a result of an emotional disorder. There's a 60% prevalence in identical twins, which is actually a high prevalence for genetic conditions. So we think there might be some biological underpinning, although we say biological gender referring to sex assigned at birth. I do think there's probably something in the neurobiology that determines your gender identity. As mentioned before, these kids are not happy kids in general until now. We're hoping to see a new generation of very happy kids. But from the data we have is that they have double the prevalence of or more of depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation is triple compared to the cisgender. You know what cisgender means now. These are transgender adolescents, by the way. Non-suicidal self-injury, like cutting, it's quadrupled. Twice as often to be in inpatient mental health care, and 4 times as often to have outpatient mental health care needs. The suicide attempt rate is as high as 41%, so that's pretty high in other studies. This is data from our clinic. So about 60% have anxiety or depression or both. It's interesting to see that the prevalence of autism spectrum disorders is 3%, which is actually a little bit high compared to the general population. And that's also reported in other studies. It may go up to 8%. So it may not be uncommon that you found a patient that has this autistic spectrum disorder and is having gender identity issues. And I think that might be related to that biological underpinning that they might be related. The rate in our clinic of self-injury and suicidal ideation and attempt is especially high in those 12 years and older, 41% for self-harm, 51% for suicidal ideation, and 16% for having had at least one suicidal attempt. This is before they come to our clinic, when they're referred to us. As mentioned, they have a very negative psychosocial impact, which derives, I think, in large part from discrimination from peers, isolation, social anxiety, discrimination and harassment, bullying, violence, school avoidance, physical and sexual abuse, homelessness, substance abuse, and at-risk behavior. 40% of gender-expansive youth or gender-fluid youth report being excluded frequently or often, or being harassed or called names involving anti-gay slurs. So that looks pretty bad. Now let's talk about the good things. What can we do to help? What improves the outcomes of transgender youth? So I'm going to show you what we know in terms of data. I put this as both number ones because I think they're equally important. Actually, we know in some surveys that parental and support and acceptance of their gender identity is the most important predictor of a good psychological outcome. There are other studies that show that peer support and acceptance is actually the number one, but they're very close. So they're both very important. So I think as a school, counselors and staff, it's very important that you promote that environment of peer support. So this gender affirmative psychological and medical therapy is what the model of care that is more accepted now. It's a model in which one supports and accepts the individual's gender identity as a psychological or mental health provider or physician. It provides a safe space to express and explore without directing one way or the other. Medical therapy to support the individual express and present in their gender identity. That means hormonal therapy, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it. Very important, reparative or conversion therapy intended to change one's gender identity or sexual orientation is not effective. It actually causes more harm. And the American Psychological Association, the American Psychiatric Association, and the American Academy of Pediatrics reject reparative therapy and support a trans-affirmative or affirmative model of care. Okay, social transition. So we were talking about children that have socially transitioned, meaning they've changed their name, their preferred name, their presentation, their haircut, their clothing. This is a photo of real children portrayed already on BuzzFeed, and they're from the Netherlands, and they are transgender. They have socially transitioned, so the ones that you might think they look like girls are actually males assigned at birth, and vice versa. Okay, so most of these kids have not started puberty or just barely starting puberty, and you can see that before puberty, it's really your presentation that kind of tells you socially if you're male or female. If you don't look at what's under your clothes, that's it. We've been trained to learn that way. So children that have this social transition actually can pass, if I can say that word, or present to the outside world very easily as the gender they feel they are. So we now have this study that was just published this year in this renowned journal of pediatrics that showed that kids who had had this early social transition before puberty, they had a similar rate of depression and psychological well-being as their siblings. So that's actually pretty good, because from what I showed you before, these kids have a much higher rate of depression and anxiety than the general population, except for mild anxiety. They still have some anxiety probably related to what they're going through. But it's actually pretty good. And so it shows that having a social transition doesn't harm, at least. Now, what happens when these kids go into puberty? So it's really dreaded. I mean, if you're cisgender, I'm cisgender, and I remember puberty wasn't fun. Imagine if it's not the puberty you want, okay? So what happens? So this is the drawing of one of our patients who is a trans male, so identifies as male, assigns female at birth, and this is how he sees himself, as with a beard and everything, but suddenly you're getting breasts, so what do? They fight and do everything they can to stop that on their own, so they try to cut their breasts, bind their chest, with everything they can, even duct tape. I've seen every single thing you can imagine. They wear packers to seem like they have genitals, male genitals. They try to gain weight and lift weights to appear more bulkier, muscular. They get horrible distress with periods, with menstrual periods, and they may even get testosterone illegally on the street or on the internet. What happens with the trans girls? So they might attempt to cut their penis. They tuck in their genitals, which they do very painful things just to kind of make it seem like it's not there. They avoid looking at their genitals at all, like they take a shower without just looking there. They wear padded bras. They have restrictive eating or anorexia to appear lean and feminine. They have a lot of distress with erections. It's like the worst horrible thing you can imagine. They get disgusted by that. And they have a lot of distress about hair coming out, facial, body hair, Adam's apple. Oh, and voice. I forgot to put this in the slides. Voice is a big thing because socially you can tell female, male with your voice, and this is a big thing for them. When their voice starts turning male or sounds very feminine and that's not how you feel, it's a big thing. And they can also get estrogen illegally. We've had some of those patients. Now, what kind of medical therapy or gender affirmative therapy we can do in clinics like ours to help? Puberty suppression. That means that we can give a medication that we use to block puberty, and we only do that once puberty has started. So we don't do that in a 7 or 8-year-old kid. When puberty starts, it can be anywhere from 9 to 14 because each child is different. At that time, when we know puberty has started, we can give a treatment. And this is a treatment that we use for precocious or early puberty a lot in the endocrinology, so it's a well-known, very safe treatment we've used for 30 years. And what this does is really put things into a pause, give them time to continue exploring their gender identity without the irreversible body effects of puberty. Because once they get breasts, once they get hair, that's not going to change, okay, unless you undo that with surgery, which is pretty costly and burdensome, right? Now, what do we know in terms of data, research? Actually, the Dutch in Amsterdam are the ones that have more experience, and they have shown that blocking puberty improves behavioral and emotional functioning, and improves global functioning measure with psychometric testing. Okay? Now, gender-affirming hormone therapy, this is testosterone for the trans males or estrogen for the trans girls. And what this would do in testosterone, they would make their hair appear in their face and in their body. Their voice will become more masculine. They will make it more muscle. It's not going to change genitals a whole lot. And estrogen is going to help them have breasts, some body contour, and it's going to block a little bit of their own testosterone. What this does is this improves their, what we call the gender dysphoria or the distress. That's what gender dysphoria means, the distress that the gender you feel is not the one that you have when you look at the mirror. And it improves body image satisfaction. This treatment, also called cross-sex hormones or hormone replacement therapy, we only started in adolescence, in mid-adolescence, sometime around age 14, 16, depending on each child. So we don't do this in young children. Surgery is recommended when they become adults around age 18. And it's called gender reassignment surgery. So in terms of, this is from the same study that looked at puberty suppression followed by this hormone treatment in adolescents. They followed patients until their early 20s in the Netherlands, and actually they showed that their quality of life, satisfaction with life, and subjective happiness were similar or better compared to the Dutch young adult population, which is pretty different from what we know from transgender patients that do not undergo this treatment. They were more likely to pursue higher education versus the Dutch population, and non-reported regret during puberty suppression, cross-sex hormone treatment, or after surgery. This is one of their patients. So this is in 2003 first in pink under puberty suppression, and then in 2009 after cross-sex hormones. So this is a trans girl, assigned male at birth. So you can see that the treatment is very effective in helping this person present in the gender she feels she is. There are no signs of maleness in her just presentation. This is when it was Miss United Kingdom a few years ago, and she's a transgender woman, and she actually hasn't had any surgery except for her genitalia. She underwent this protocol of puberty suppression in adolescence, followed by cross-sex hormones. She has her own breasts and her own body otherwise. So you can see that it's pretty cosmetically effective. And this is one of our patients. She's been on the news, so I'm allowed to show these pictures. And this is when she was, before transitioning, she would draw her body as she would like it to be in a bikini. Then she's here receiving puberty suppression, and then she's now getting her hormones, and she's very, very well adjusted, very well doing it in every single way. Wanted to point out that all these academic medical societies, including the American Endocrine Society and Pediatric Endocrine Society, have adopted this treatment in adolescents of puberty suppression followed by cross-sex hormones as standard of care for transgender adolescents since 2009. So it's not that new. I want to talk just a minute. Do I have a minute? You do. Okay. My experience, just from the medical point of view, about the restroom use in school, because it's a big issue for our patients. Even though I prescribe hormones, they come to me with these issues, and I want to share them with you. First of all, restroom is a biological need. We all need to go. And these are two patients that have been on the news as well, so I'm okay sharing their names and their pictures, but imagine, Evan has transitioned to his male identity and Cami to her female, And imagine if they are forced to use, imagine if Evan has to use the female restroom, or if Cami has to use the male restroom, what would happen, right? So when that happens, the socially transitioned student is, when they are forced to use the restroom opposite to their gender identity, they're verbally questioned, they're pulled out, they're physically and verbally abused, like they just talked about. This leads to worsening depression, refusing to use their restroom, or to go to school completely. What happens if they use the staff or gender-neutral restroom, which some schools are, want to accommodate, and they want to help, and they want to do this, but what happens? So it is some sort of segregation, because you're telling them you're different. You can't use like the one like everybody else who's normal can use, so you're not normal in a way. And they have other psychological and medical problems that, from what I hear, includes they get questioned by peers and school staff that are not aware of the transgender status. Why are you using the nurse's restroom? They get sanctioned for being late because it's not usually a restroom that is close to the classrooms. They just decide not to use the restroom because it's too far away, or they get asked, so they hold urination, they get urinary tract infections, they get accidents, and they may get constipation. Sometimes they just don't want to go to school because it's such a big issue. And I think that restroom is a basic human right, and every student should have the same access, transgender or not. So to conclude, transgender youth is a vulnerable population at high risk for psychiatric comorbidity and suicide. This is the vulnerable population. Parental and peer support improve outcomes. Gender affirmative therapy, including puberty suppression followed by gender affirming hormone therapy in adolescents, leads to improved psychological functioning. Transgender youth need school support and acceptance to feel safe and thrive, as does any other student. And I'm going to close with this quote from Elie Wiesel, who's winner of the Nobel Peace Prize. And he's a survivor of a Nazi concentration camp as a teenager. And he said, "Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. Sometimes we must interfere. When human dignity is in jeopardy, sensitivities become irrelevant." Thank you.
Where were you when I was 7?
Right? No kidding.
Good grief. Yeah, because transition expenses are not covered by insurance, so I had to pay for this with my retirement. But the good news is parts of it are still under warranty. So I got that going for me. Paul Castillo of Lambda Legal is a staff attorney in the South Central Regional Office of Lambda Legal, the oldest and largest national legal organization committed to achieving full recognition of the civil rights of lesbians, gay men, bisexuals, transgender people, and those with HIV. Paul played a significant role in securing the freedom to marry nationwide for same-sex couples and their families as a member of the legal team in the landmark case Obergefell versus Hodges. Paul is also a strong advocate for LGBT service members and veterans. Prior to joining Lambda Legal, he enforced federal civil rights statutes for the United States Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights. And he's also a really good guy. Paul, in light of the recent lawsuit filed by the Texas Attorney General Paxton, which sought to set aside the Department of Education's interpretation of Title IX, I'd like to have you discuss the laws affecting transgender youth in schools, including Title IX, and a right to privacy issue, local rules, ordinances, and laws as applicable. Most schools have a code of ethics that educators must follow. A letter to school superintendents in Texas from the ACLU stated in part, "Texas school districts are not parties to the lawsuit and are not prevented from shielding their students from discrimination." Attorney General Paxton's suggestion that your school district is now protected and may therefore discriminate against transgender students with impunity is a gross misstatement of the order and the law. Can you help sort all this stuff out in, well, I don't know, tonight?
That's a
10 minutes.
that's a very good question. Thank you, Leslie, and thanks everybody for coming tonight. Can you all hear me back there? Is the mic on?
You just get right up on it.
I wanted to take a moment and do some usual disclaimers. I wouldn't be an attorney if I didn't give my disclaimers. I am not your lawyer. I'm not the school's lawyer, but I am a lawyer. And so I hope to impart some information, and you all go through in-service days trying to kind of navigate the law and understand your responsibilities as educators. And so in 15 minutes, we will not cover all the laws, but I do hope to impart kind of some highlights of what's going on today. I will say that with respect to Title IX, this area is certainly involving, and so what I say today may change tomorrow. So with that, I did want to talk also about that I'm coming at this not only from the standpoint of a staff attorney with Lambda Legal, I'm also coming at this from the standpoint as a former investigator with the United States Department of Education Office for Civil Rights. So I have that lens on top of what I do and have the benefit of having that experience of life on the other side. But what I will say is that what's going on around the country and what's going on in the lives of transgender youth and what parents have to deal with is not only something they have to think about from a social perspective and social transition, but they also have to think about the legal implications. From the standpoint of a parent, you have to ask questions about changing gender markers on identification documents and when it's appropriate. And so on top of the social transition, there is also the legal changes that need to be processed. And for many people, they don't either have the access to or the laws may prevent them from doing that. But also, as educators, you have responsibilities to your students. And I will say that coming at this from a standpoint of having enforced federal civil rights laws, we forget this is about education. Education is the great equalizer. And so some of these laws that are protecting our youth is that so everybody can get the education and so that we can have our students and Ryan's daughter can reach her fullest potential. And so I will mention a couple of the laws that you need to think about and certainly explore further, but just know that there's no way that this can even happen within a day. So as educators, there are school policies. School policies often start with the Texas Association of School Boards, often get adopted or modified by the school boards themselves before they're implicated. And so I'll mention that FFH and FFI policy, if you're familiar with the school policies, are your bullying and harassment policies at school. And so these provide the mechanisms for filing grievances, who do you turn to, and how those complaints get processed. With respect to FFH, there has been implemented from the Texas Association of School Boards the policy prohibiting gender-based harassment. And so this is on top of the numerous laws that you'll have to deal with. But on top of that, as educators, you're thinking about other laws that may come into play when you're dealing with transgender youth. There are Title IX of the Education Amendments, which I'll put that aside for a moment because that seems to get the biggest airplay on the news, but you also have other responsibilities as well. Transgender students, because of their gender dysphoria, may experience depression and anxiety and have 504 plans and IEPs. So you have to think about that. Gender expression, a student's gender expression could be and is protected by the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. So when you're talking about dress at proms in yearbook pictures, the First Amendment provides protection to the student as well as equal protection found in the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. You also have FERPA with regard to privacy. And again, coming back again to Title IX. So there's a lot of laws that you need to think about when you're dealing with transgender students or gender nonconforming students, and kind of pave the path. Now, each of your schools have policies, and what I will say before I get into what's happening with Title IX, because we'll talk about that a little bit deeper, is first a premise. Because of the sound bites that you might see in the news, and that get airplay, and that might be repeated by parents. Transgender boys are boys. Transgender girls are girls. Full stop. There are no boys going into girls' bathrooms or girls going into boys' bathrooms. Okay? So, the Office for Civil Rights has interpreted Title IX to include, well, let me take a step back. So, Title IX is a federal civil rights law, a statute that prohibits discrimination based on sex. And over time, Title IX has been interpreted to encompass many aspects. It's been interpreted to include sexual harassment. Doesn't, it's not there in the terms of Title IX, but it's been interpreted to include it by case law. It's been interpreted to include a student's nonconformity with gender stereotypes. It's been interpreted to include equal opportunity for athletics. And they leave it to the office, Congress leaves it to the Office for Civil Rights to interpret what those law requires. And often, the Office for Civil Rights, for all their federal civil rights statutes, end up issuing a Dear Colleague letter. Dear Colleague letter, which articulates what the law already is, or what the law already requires. But educators such as yourselves and school districts are asking, well, what can I do? What are my responsibilities under the law? And so this, again, to counter a soundbite you might hear in the news, is not an edict. It's not a directive. It was what already existed in the law. So this wasn't anything that was new. Back when I was investigating at the Office for Civil Rights, we had come up with the Office for Civil Rights had come up with the bullying and harassment guidance back in 2010, including LGBT students and their rights, just as all other students, to be free from harassment. So this is what caused all the controversy. As many of you know, Texas and many other states filed a lawsuit against the Department of Justice, the Department of Education, among other federal agencies, including the EEOC and the Department of Labor, saying that this was new law. This guidance was new law. And it didn't go through proper procedures. So, as a result, the particular school district that is a plaintiff in this case, here in Texas, has about 100, 120 students in the district, according to the superintendent, and not one of them is openly or has been identified as transgender. So, we don't have a transgender student to articulate the harms in this lawsuit. Not one exists. There's not a transgender student who is a plaintiff or part of this lawsuit. It is merely the state of Texas and these other states who are articulating that they think that the guidance is incorrectly, is wrong, so they have an opinion, but that's great. Courts don't decide opinions, they decide controversies with actual transgender students who have harm. Texas had filed for what's called a preliminary injunction, basically a request that the judge put on hold the guidance. And that preliminary injunction was granted. So let me tell you what the preliminary injunction does and does not do. The preliminary injunction does not require schools who are affirming or have affirming policies to suddenly start to discriminate against transgender students. Schools that have those policies can continue to respect the dignity of their transgender students in schools and have no obligation under this preliminary injunction to change that procedure. Schools who don't have a written policy but have handled this on a case-by-case basis to affirm a transgender student need not change their process. They can continue to respect their transgender youth that are in schools. With respect to what this preliminary injunction says, schools that wish to discriminate against transgender youth can hide behind this preliminary injunction, at least for the time being. It could change tomorrow, it could be stayed, but they can hide behind it so they don't have to change their policy to respect transgender students, with a caveat. The caveat being the big stick that the Office for Civil Rights holds, which is, after investigation finds that you're in violation of Title IX. Now, they seek voluntary compliance from the school, but if the school doesn't do that, then they can start a process to try and rescind their federal financial assistance, their federal money. The preliminary injunction has no effect on attorneys, on transgender youth who are not parties to this litigation. So schools that continue to discriminate are still at risk of having a lawsuit brought against them by the transgender student and attorneys representing the transgender student and their families against the school. So it's still a risky endeavor, even though at this point there might be a suspension of the investigations that are currently with OCR, or they can't threaten to rescind their federal funds. They still do so at a great risk of litigation. And because schools aren't going to be penalized for having inclusive policies, not only is it the right thing to do, they still have continuing Title IX obligations. And those arguments, because of lawsuits that are going on around the country, are still available to attorneys who represent transgender students. So if you have not, I would encourage you to read the guidance that was issued by the Office for Civil Rights. Because it provides many ways, again, ways that have existed and legal responsibilities that have existed prior to this guidance to respect transgender students so they can have equal access to educational opportunities. Basically, so they can go to school and they can learn. So, I will say that this litigation will continue. There could be stay filed tomorrow, meaning the Department of Education and the Department of Justice could ask this judge or a higher court to hold off on, having OCR process complaints. That's why I say it could change tomorrow. So what you see on the news tonight shouldn't dictate the way you're approaching these things. And again, remember, you have other laws that you need to think about with respect to transgender youth. And so if we kind of take a step back and say, there are a lot of things going on for transgender youth. There's social transition, there's legal obstacles. You, as educators, have a job to educate the students. When it comes down to it, respecting transgender students and respecting all LGBT students who are seeking equal access, it's not only the right thing to do, it's the legal thing to do. And we will watch this play out, and ultimately the school district in Virginia, in the Fourth Circuit, where the Fourth Circuit said Title IX, we're going to defer to the Office for Civil Rights, and Title IX, which prohibits discrimination based on sex, includes discrimination based on a student's gender identity, is the law of the Fourth Circuit and can still be found persuasive in other circuits. And while that school district has asked the United States Supreme Court to hear this, the United States Supreme Court could take up this option, and they're the only ones, not a single judge in the middle of Texas, but they're the ones that are going to have the power to overrule what the Fourth Circuit said, or they'll leave it alone, in which case that's still good law in that district. So thank you for your time, and thank you for coming tonight, and I appreciate this, and hopefully we left you with something that you can take back with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'm glad you're on our side. Next up is Steve Rudner, the chairman of the board of Equality Texas, the state's largest LGBT lobbying organization. Steve is an advisory board member of Texas Competes, which is a coalition of businesses who have joined together by signing a pledge which declares that our state must be open and welcoming to the LGBT community in order to remain economically competitive. Don't believe that's important? Ask North Carolina. He's a board member of the Personal Stories Project, an incoming member of the Board of Freedom for All Americans, the national bipartisan campaign to secure full non-discrimination protections for LGBT people nationwide. Steve previously served as a member of the board of Green Hill School and the Children's Medical Center of Dallas Foundation, and as president of the board of Levine Academy. In his spare time, he's the managing partner of Rudner Law Offices, which represents hotels and resorts throughout the world, and a member of the bars of the states of Texas, New York, Arizona, Colorado, and the District of Columbia. You must really like taking the bar exam. Steve, the 2017 legislative session is still months away, yet Texas state leaders are already busy using the courts to throw up roadblocks to civil rights. The 2015 session featured over 20 anti-LGBT bills, including 4 attempting to criminalize bathroom usage by transgender people. I used the bathroom here tonight and didn't attack anyone. What can we look forward to in the next legislative session?
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you, everybody, for having me. The next legislative session, which starts in January, is going to be brutal. In the last session, we had 21, depending on how you count, horribly anti-LGBT bills. I'm proud to say that Equality Texas championed the defeat of 21 of those bills. In the next session, there is the possibility that we will have, just here in Texas, over 100 bills directed at depriving equality to members of the LGBT community. And the Lieutenant Governor, as everyone knows, has declared his #1 priority in a state where we have children dying in foster care, in a state where we can't fund education, in a state with a whole list of serious problems. Our Lieutenant Governor has declared his #1 legislative priority trying to tell people in Texas where they should go to the bathroom, which we have figured out for years here in the state of Texas without the help of anybody in Austin. Let me just start off by saying I consider myself to be so fortunate. Before I became involved in the work that I do, I don't know that I knew anyone who was transgender. And now I have met so many great transgender Texans, including a large number of transgender kids. And if this point has not already come across, and I'm sure that it has, I just want you to take a moment. I want to ask you to take a moment to consider how brave these kids are, who all they want to do is be who they are, despite the harassment that they get from their peers, despite the difficulties, despite all of the despite all of this. And if we each look into our personal lives and you ask yourselves, how much energy would you have to expend in order to hide who you were, in order to not be who you were, in order to participate in everyone's denial of who you are? And if you were a kid, how much time would that take away from your school day and your ability to learn? And all these kids want to do is lead their authentic lives. And they are not recruiting other transgender children. They're not trying to turn anyone's child into a transgender child. They are not looking to attack someone in the bathroom. I often say the Lieutenant Governor lives in a whole different world than I do, filled with public restrooms in which people are exposing themselves to each other. I've never been in that bathroom. And I've been using the bathroom my whole life, as I suspect most of us have. So these kids are not just brave kids, enduring all of the things that you heard about, but our job as educators, our job as parents, our job as citizens is to love the kids that we have. Not to change the kids that we have, not to force the kids we have into a life that we think they should lead or with the morals that we were brought up. Our job is to love the kids and counsel the kids and guide the kids that we have. It certainly is not our job to force these children into health problems, and to force them in not going to the bathroom all day, into forcing them to be outed, or in forcing them to be discriminated against. Or in many cases, forcing them to not go to school anymore because it's not worth it, the harassment that they will take. It's certainly not our job to be complicit. You hear often that we should stop children from being bullied. I think sometimes we forget as grown-ups that when we don't stop the bullying, when we don't stand up for transgender kids, we are complicit in that bullying. That's the opposite of our job as educators and as fellow human beings. The Lieutenant Governor likes to talk about this issue, dealing with transgender people, as if transgender people have just this year been transported here from a different planet. We've had transgender people here forever. And transgender people have been using the bathroom alongside us forever. And this debate is mystifying. This political debate that we have is mystifying. Because transgender people, and I hear this all the time, well, it's the transgender people who are looking for something new or trying to change things. And quite the opposite is true. Transgender people are trying to go to the bathroom tomorrow where they went to the bathroom yesterday. They're not looking to stir anything up. They're not looking for special rights. And again, being transgender is not something that's contagious or that we need to fear. So in terms of the upcoming legislative session, among the bad bills last session was a bill filed by Representative Pena from Houston, it's called a bounty bill. And that bill said that if you were a public school student in the state of Texas and you saw and reported a fellow student who was using a bathroom that didn't conform with the gender which they were assigned at birth and you turned them in, you get $1,500.
Seriously.
I could not make that up.
Seriously.
That bill will be back in the Texas legislature. I hope that we haven't forgotten to make this point, or that this point hasn't been clear throughout the course of the evening. But transgender children are about a lot more than the bathroom that they use. And I think we do a huge disservice to the dignity of people when all we want to do is make them about where they go to the bathroom. So they are your students, they are here, they exist, they deserve not to be discriminated against. And let me tell you the saddest and most tragic part of this, because I could give you a long list of the bills that we're going to confront in the next legislative session, which will be horrible. And many people don't know, just as a starting point, that here in the state of Texas, as we sit here today, it is perfectly legal in most of Texas to fire someone, or to decline to hire someone, or to deny housing, an apartment, a mortgage, or to deny service in a restaurant to someone in Texas because they are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. That's legal in most of Texas. It's not legal as an example, it's not legal in Dallas County. It's not legal in Fort Worth. It's not legal in Austin. There are places in the state in which that is not legal. But through most of the state of Texas, that's the environment in which these kids live, where they and their families know that they go into a restaurant in some place where somebody believes that they're transgender or suspects that they're transgender, and they can be kicked out. They can be denied service. That's the environment we're talking about. So we can look at a long list of horrible bills that we will be fighting. And as you heard, this separate entity called Texas Competes, which now has over 1,000 Texas businesses, including 36 Fortune 500 companies, who have all said that we don't think that discrimination against the LGBT community is in the best economic interest of the state. It won't let us attract future employers. It doesn't let us attract millennials. It doesn't allow us to be economically productive. We don't want to be North Carolina. So we've got a busy, full legislative agenda, but here's what gets lost in all of it. And as educators, as teachers and counselors, really the one thing I want to leave you with, other than we'd love to have your help. Our kids, no matter what age they are, they watch the news. They hear what's going on. It is our state's leaders who are the bullies. And that's where this all comes from. And when you hear the lieutenant governor say publicly, as he has said over and over again, he's not against transgender kids, but what about the rest of us? What he's doing is he's creating a division that does not exist and need not exist. Our kids are kids. Trans boys are boys. Trans girls are girls. And our kids are so far ahead of us. They've got this figured out. All of us in the room, we're the old people. We can't get it. We don't get it. We're not processing it. They are mystified by this. Every out, well-adjusted trans kid that I've met is in a school with peers who understand it's not an issue. They can't get it. At my kids, I have boys who are seniors this year. And several years ago, a kid transitioned at their school. And everybody, all of the kids knew. It wasn't a surprise. It wasn't anything. And the school did something beautiful that I will leave you with. And there were some parents who had some concern about the bathroom issue. And that's the only thing we ever want to talk about when we talk about transgender kids, the bathroom issue, where we're all being attacked. And I hope you all know there has never been in the state of Texas or anywhere else in the United States that I'm aware of a single incident of a transgender kid attacking or harassing any other kid in any bathroom. Because if you're transgender, all you want to do is pee and get the hell out of the bathroom. You're not looking. These trans kids are the victims. They are not the aggressors. We've got that all wrong as well. But at the school, there was some discussion, because everybody knew that this kid had transitioned and this child had done it publicly, so the child wasn't being outed. And there was some discussion about where the child would go. And I think at many schools, I know that at many schools the answer is, well, this is the special place that we've decided, because we want to be accommodating. So this is the special place that we've created for this transgender child to go, which of course isolates and causes the kid to be late because the nurse's office is closed when the nurse is only there half a day, so I guess you don't get to go to the bathroom that half of the day. At this school, and I've never been more proud. They said this boy will, of course, use the boys' bathroom. Anyone who has a problem with that is free to use the nurse's office. Okay, that's what we do as mature adults. That's how that is the prescription, I think, for handling this. I don't understand, it's hard for me to understand why that comes so easily to our children, and sadly is something that our lieutenant governor is not able or is unwilling to grasp. It's going to be a tough and brutal session. I don't know, I can't predict yet what the outcome will be. But our kids are watching, and they expect better from us.
Thank you. Steve's certainly a tireless worker on our behalf, and we're so glad to have him. I mean, he does so much for us. Thanks so much to our panel. A lot of good information. I hope it was of use for you tonight. We'd love to take questions. If you have specific questions for anyone on the panel, please feel free, because we can hang out. You guys can hang out for a couple of minutes, and because we'd love to have you direct them. And obviously, it's an educational environment, so ask away. Yeah, the question, it was from one of the principals. She said the problem isn't often from the kids, the peer-to-peer issues, but it's sometimes the parents of transgender kids that have issues with how their kids are identified at school.
Right, so in your, oh, thank you, wow. So in your example, or your question, if I understood it correctly, you've got parents of transgender kids who are upset that they have transgender kids, and the school is trying to cooperate and do what's best for the transgender kid, and that's upsetting the parents of the transgender kid. I can't think, as a starting point, I can't think of anything more tragic. And all of the statistics that you heard, to me, that's child abuse. I'll just say that. To me, that when you are doing something that leads your kid to suicide or suicide attempt, I think you're not doing your job as a parent. So here's what was lost in the whole Fort Worth debate with our Lieutenant Governor and Attorney General. You may know that when the Fort Worth School District issued its policy, the superintendent issued a policy to implement, he issued guidelines to implement a policy that had already been approved by the board. And everybody went crazy because part of that initially, and it's been changed now, was that the school is not supposed to out a transgender kid to the parents if the student does not want that to happen. And the way that this was played politically was, well, you're forcing the school to keep something from the parents. And the real answer, and it bears upon your question, is this, and I'm sorry for being blunt. If you are the parent of a transgender kid, and you don't know that you are the parent of a transgender kid, then you are the problem. And if your transgender kid feels safe talking to a teacher or a counselor about being transgender, but not safe talking to you, then it is the job of the counselor to keep that information from the parent, which is a very uncomfortable legal situation, but to me, I'll tell you why I reached that conclusion. Everybody in this room knows that when you believe, as an educator, you believe that a student is being abused, you have a duty to report that. Our job is to look out for what's in the best interest of the child and not allow the child to be abused. This is abuse. When a child comes to you and says, I'm telling you that I'm transgender, I cannot tell my parents. Why can you not tell your parents? What's going to happen to you at home? And that's why I'm telling you, with everything that I believe, when a child is brave enough to reach out to an adult other than their parent to say, this is who I am, what they're saying is, I need help and I need protection. And I don't have an answer for you about what you do when the parent complains, but I'll tell you this, your job is not to be the caretaker of the parent. And that's very uncomfortable, I know.
I'll tag on to that just a little bit. I work at a nonprofit, and for some reason or another, when transgender people call, they funnel it to me. I don't know why. But anyway, they do. And I'm actually saddened and often sickened at the number of calls that I get from transgender kids that came out to their parents and were thrown out of the house. And they're calling and telling me, I need a place to stay. And there are precious few places to send them. There's not enough beds. And so that's heartbreaking to me. So again, if that confidence is kept, a lot of times you're keeping a child from either being thrown out on the street or later maybe even taking their own life. So the stakes are really, really high.
And I guess, because I really don't feel I answered your question, I think you know the best answer to your question is that when you've got a parent who says, I understand my child has told you he or she is transgender, and I don't approve of that, or I can't, and I don't want you involved in that, or whatever, I think that's the time for you to refer that parent to someone who is an expert on that. And maybe it's the folks at Genesis, or maybe all of us as panelists can help you develop a list of to whom those parents ought to be referred. But you're not, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, that's not a hurdle you're ever going to clear. Okay? And we have parents who, for religious beliefs, I can't get on board with that. And somebody other than you has to say, and it's almost a cliche how often we hear it. But when you're a parent, maybe it is uncomfortable for you. Maybe it's not how you were raised or what you're familiar with. But you have to say, am I going to disown my child? Am I going to watch the child who I love go down a path that will lead to physical harm and suicide and all of these horrible outcomes? Or is someone impolitely going to get in my face and make me deal with reality? As the principal, maybe you're not the person that can do that, but there are people to whom you can refer those parents who will say, you got to get on board. It's your child's life that's at stake.
Yeah. Yeah, we do have some parents that call, they are in denial. I mean, they really want us to tell them, no, your kid is not transgender. That's why they call us. And and I've seen situations where I would think, oh my God, we're never going to change this parent's mind for religious beliefs, for whatever. And actually they do. I mean, when they realize and you tell them, you're losing your child or you're accepting your child. I mean, that's it. They do change. I mean, in our experience, thankfully, I mean, they're horrible situations, but I think as a counselor, I would do my best to refer the parent to somebody who can educate the parent, and we're here for that, and just slowly, progress and move along. I wouldn't just give that up. Yeah.
And as a parent, I want to add that when we came to know that our child was transgender, I did not handle it very well initially. And one of the things that I can credit to my ability to be here today and tell the stories that I tell is because I was able to find a parent group of other parents of transgender children who had already gone through what I was about to go through. And I can say that when I was hearing other fathers talk about taking their trans daughters to the father-daughter dance, I told them to their face that it wasn't going to happen for me. But I did, eventually. And so one of the things that I would say is that encourage those parents to seek out opportunities to speak and meet with other parents who have transgender kids, because once you begin to see other people and they share stories of the exact same experience that they're going through, it becomes a lot easier to move forward. And that really worked for me.
The parent, in your example, the parent also is assuming that it's his or her job to decide the child's identity. That's not we think that of course we guide our children. We have a great role in counseling and raising our children. We don't get to decide who our children are. Our children are who they are. And so it's sort of presumptuous of a parent to say, that's not how it's going to be.
It's our time to love them.
And
Shelley?
Just to reiterate what Steve just said, the United States Supreme Court has said that everyone has a fundamental right to define and express their identity. And they've also said, and this is in one of the recent Supreme Court decisions, 29 times, everyone has a right to dignity. And I think that that's what you're doing is educating, you're informing your students, and you have to set an example.
If we just get the parents still on. Yeah.
Y'all have like a list of resources, especially in this area for parent groups, working with kids.
Over here is Melissa, and she has a whole bunch of cards because she's like one of the heads of the mother hens, and she can give you cards for support groups and things going on in North Texas.
and
And Anna right there, she's our clinic program coordinator. she can also give you information for the clinic.
And I have cards for our organization. We have 3 chapters in DFW: Fort Worth, Dallas, and Denton. So we have support group meetings for transgender individuals and parents in all 3 areas. So yeah, and I was just going to say, we have worked with parents who were not on board. If we could just get them to the meeting, you know what I mean? We're just get them to the meeting, and we have had some that have come just to talk to us. And they have tried to get us to say that their kid is not transgender. Well, I mean, I'm not a medical professional. This is not my job to tell you whether your child is transgender or not. But it is my job to tell you what can happen to your child if you do not get on board and support your child. One of the biggest questions we ask sometimes when we can't ask anything else, do you want to go shopping with your child or do you want to bury your child? You have a choice. You have 2 choices. You can either support your child or you can bury your child. And then we'll show them the statistics that we've all seen tonight. And I will say, I've lived in the LGBTQ world all of my life. I have never lived in straight world, as we call it, straight world. But I can tell you that my straight friends have absolutely no idea about what's going on in the transgender community. Even with all of the press, even with all the media, my best friend of 30 years is straight, in straight world, and she has never heard any of this. None of it. Now that she's started hearing this, now she's become an ally, and she's on board, and she's like, what can I do to help? So we need parents to support their kids. That's what we need.
Yeah, there's a lot of changes that need to take place. People's jaws are on the ground all the time, and I say, I've got a health insurance plan at work, but it specifically excludes transgender people.
Right.
Sorry,
And
no health insurance for you.
you know, I promise I'll stop after this, but I really, I'll try to. I know you know this also, but whichever parent that is that's having that conversation with you, part of that also is that's your opportunity to realize how bad that kid has it at home. And so whatever you're going to do with the parents and wherever we're going to refer the parents and whatever, I know that you will recognize this is a kid that needs every bit of support from every loving and kind adult that this kid can find, because this is a kid that does not have it at home, and that's maybe the best thing that we can all do as adults. You can put over here how you're going to counsel the parents and who you're going to refer them to, but please let's all remember that's a child who is in as deep of a crisis as you can imagine.
You know, my partner, Katie, is a transgender woman, and I love her dearly, and she describes her dad as her first bully. He used to try and slap the girl out of her, and it didn't work, but it just made her look at him as her first bully. And sometimes that's the case.
And the one thing I'll say, too, is that if you are open to it and if your school district is on board with it, Oliver and I both do gender identity training, transgender training, ally training, and I would love to see more of those trainings happening in the schools, like within the high schools and the junior highs, and the school districts themselves. I think Oliver's done 1 or 2. I do quite a few for universities. And I go and speak to GSAs. So if you want somebody to come and speak to both of us, do that as well. So anyone in this room can contact us.
We bring the dog and the pony.
Yep.
If there are no other questions, I know that we've run a little bit late. We really appreciate your time on a school night. I know everybody is super, super busy. Jeannie has some handouts and flyers and things, some evaluation forms that we'd love to have you fill out, because it's going to help us to design what we do. But I wanted to thank everybody for coming tonight. Really, really